It felt very, very scary at first because I'd never been into the Westwood hospital, and obviously it was a very large hospital, and the ward that we went onto was a long way down the drive. And so as you walk up, because we get on a bus and you walk up the drive, and you met lots of people with learning disabilities that I'd never met before that came to talk to you and ask you who you were and where you were going to go and everything. And then when you walked onto the ward, it was a large ward, and you walked in the door, and it was for people who had a lot of physical disabilities and people who needed a lot of support in eating, drinking, bathing, personal care. And it was where the children were admitted. So, like I said, the youngest at the time was about 14, I think. I mean, obviously, I can't really remember that far back, but and the ward hadn't been modernised. So, in the bathrooms, there was a bath in the centre of the room, and then there was an open running drainage system, and we were allowed to bath, which now wouldn't be allowed. You know, a volunteer wouldn't be. They didn't do any checks on me. They didn't do any. I wasn't we were classed as a police check or anything like that now. I just remember being overwhelmed because there were so many people on a beanbag or in a wheelchair, and I had never experienced talking to people who couldn't answer me back because the people on the ward couldn't speak verbally, so therefore I was a bit bewildered. I didn't know her really, so I followed the lead of the person I was with, and she'd been going for about 6 months, so I followed her lead on how to interact and how to communicate with people. But I remember an overwhelming sadness that people lived in such a large environment and sort of without any close contact with people, and needed everything doing for them. And the bedrooms, well, they weren't bedrooms, they were dormitories, and they had I don't know, 10, 15 beds all in. They didn't have a wardrobe each, and it was just a shock to me at the time because I didn't know what to expect. And I remember going home and crying. You know, my mum couldn't understand. I was in floods of tears, and I couldn't really explain why I felt sad. I just felt an overwhelming sadness. But I went back 2 or 3 more times, just really to try and overcome, because I felt like I needed to do something to make things better, but I didn't know what to do or how to do it, apart from sitting with people and talking to people. And one of the ladies liked to bath, so we were allowed to give her a bubble bath. So we used to give her a bubble bath on a Sunday afternoon because that's what she wanted to do. We were allowed to feed people, which I'd never fed anybody before in my life. I didn't know what was doing or how to do it, and nobody showed you how to do it, you just did it. So the overwhelming feeling at the time was sadness. And after being a volunteer for a few weeks, I stopped going because I didn't know what to do, and it sort of made me think what did I want to do with my life, because I was 16 at the time. And then I went to work in a library. But 2 years down the line, I still had this urge to do something, and that's when I saw the job advertised for a care assistant.
Okay, so you said you then saw the job advertised for the care assistant, so was that when you started as a student?
No, I didn't. At that time, I didn't even know you could do nursing for people with learning disability. I had no awareness. My friend had gone away to do nurse training, and I thought that was working in the hospitals, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to work with poorly people. I didn't want to see blood and deal with people in trauma. I didn't want to do that. I knew I didn't want to do that, but at the time I didn't know you could do anything else. So that's when I went to be a care assistant, and it was a new unit that was called a special care unit, and it was based in what was called a training centre, and that was run by the local authority. And I was fortunate at the time that the manager of that service said to me, you need to do something. You need to get some qualifications. You need to do something. Have you read this leaflet? And he gave me a leaflet on learning disability training, or it was called mental handicap training at that time. And I didn't know that it existed. So there were some contact details, and I wrote to them, and they sent me the information about how to apply to be a student nurse and what that student nurse training involved. And that's when I got interviews at 3 different hospitals. And and then I chose to go to Leeds, and I lived in the nurses' home in Leeds, at a hospital called Meanwood Park, which was a bigger hospital than Westwood. It was even bigger. In the grounds it was even bigger, but it had more wards, it had more patients. So that was my introduction to being a student nurse. New Year's Eve 1979, I went to live in the nurses' home and started my nurse training. And then my first ward placement was about in the February, and that was a children's ward. Again, working with children about 8 to 9 year old. Some of the children live there, but we also was a respite service because there was no services in Leeds for families who needed some respite. So the children came onto the ward for respite, and that was my first ward experience. And took 3 of the children on holiday to Derbyshire Miners in Skegness, which was a large holiday camp, and it was just for people with learning disabilities, and it was full of staff and people with learning disabilities. The whole week was just designed for people. We all went together and we all stayed together. We didn't venture out. We all just stayed in that one camp, which, when I think back now, is quite shocking, really. But
please could you tell us more about this? So, what was it like working at this when you were at the holiday camp?
Well, thinking in mind, I was a student nurse. I'd only just done 3 months training, and I was sent with 3 children on a bus with other people from the hospital who also each staff had 2 or 3 people to look after. One of the people was in a wheelchair. Well, it was a buggy. It was classed as a buggy because she was only small. And then I had 2 people who could walk. 2 children, sort of. I think one was about 11 and one was about 12, and a little girl in the buggy. And we arrived and we all slept in one room together. And we ate all our meals in a large dining area all together. There were set meal times that you had to go for your meals at certain times. And socially then on an evening there was discos or something that we went to on an evening, but we did everything together. You know, there wasn't any individuality. We were all together as a group. And I just remember it being a really long week, and I cried a lot, and I rang my boyfriend at the time, crying because I didn't know how I could cope looking after 3 people with very different needs. And it was supposed to be a holiday for people, and I would like, yeah, it was different from being at Meanwood, but it was not what they would have probably chosen to do.
And you were saying also about when you became a student nurse, you were mainly working with children compared to when you were volunteering. The youngest were in the early to mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
So, in what ways would the needs of the different age groups different, and the way you have to...
Well, I remember very clearly on the first ward I ever worked at Meanwood, which was the children's ward, is that we kept getting told by the sister and the charge nurse, as they were at the time, that the environment needed to be more homely and more home-like, because it was a ward which had been cut up, it had been modernised as at the time, and we were encouraged to go out and buy cushions and pillows and toys, and we were told to make it look like it was a homely environment, because, you know, children shouldn't be living in a ward environment. But upstairs there was still, I think there were 6 beds in each area. There were 6 beds altogether in each area. The bathrooms had been adapted, and they were better than people had ever had. But there were children with physical needs and children with very difficult behaviour, and children who didn't like to keep the clothes on, children who wanted to take the clothes off all the time and run round outside. And at the back of the ward was an enclosed area which was supposed to be a garden, but it was just a load of grass. And I remember we had a Canadian nurse. He was a qualified nurse, and he was very, at the time people thought he was very outrageous in his thoughts, about how children should be looked after, because he used to get in the summer we used to get water out and paddling pools out and that, and he used to let the children run free and in and out of the water and everything, and everybody was shocked that, you know, that these children were allowed to run free and do things, and it was, for me, I was thinking, the children, they should be allowed to be children, whereas the older staff on the ward who'd been around a long time were shocked that these children were not just sat in the place doing what they should be doing and behaving as they classed it. He was classed, I remember him being classed as outrageous in his thoughts, because he said children should be children, they should be allowed to be run free and do things that they wanted to do. As a student nurse, you were only ever on a placement for 3 months. So I was only ever on that ward for 3 months and then moved on to another ward. That's what happened in your student nurse training. You had 2 weeks in nursing school, learning about the ward, about the needs of the people where you were going to be going to. Then you did a 12-week placement on the ward, and then you had 2 weeks holiday, and then you had 2 weeks back in training school, 3 months back on a ward. So as a student nurse, I kept moving round and obviously seeing different areas where people... and as part of the nurse training, you went out with a community nurse. And I remember thinking, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I want to be out there in the community with families and working alongside people. But it was only about 4 community nurses for the whole of Leeds at the time. So it was like, I just thought it was a pipe dream. I never thought it was going to happen.